Hi, welcome to Homeschooling Using Disney Parks. I'm Penny Rogers. I blog over at Our Crazy Adventures in Autism Land, and today we're going to talk about the many, many ways you can use Disney Parks to homeschool. What can you teach at Disney Parks? Well, you can teach a ton of stuff, but today we're going to talk about how to teach art, literature, nature, American history, science, geography, cultural studies, and a couple other things. But really, you can fall into educational activities at Disney Parks. You don't even have to plan it. Lots of people use Disney Parks if they live local to them as their main homeschooling curriculum, and some people just want educational activities to do while you're visiting the park with your children. I don't always use educational activities when we go to the parks because nobody wants to go to the parks and always be in teaching mode or be in learning mode. But even without trying, you can certainly teach tons of things at Disney parks. So I'm gonna show you a couple examples of stuff you can set up, and also come through with some examples of stuff that you don't even have to plan for in order to do some homeschooling while you're at Disney parks. So let's talk art first. Art is the easiest thing to teach at Disney because it's everywhere. You have the from the Festival of the Arts to costuming, but so let's start with the Festival of the Arts. It's an art festival, obviously, every January at Epcot, and it's 3 days of they have canopies set up with artists in it, so you can see your kids can watch the artist drawing or sculpting. They have various different mediums there, and they can also do lots of hands-on stuff. They show you how they do Disney art, obviously, because it's at Epcot, but they show you lots of other things like how to do digital art, animation, things like that. So Festival of the Arts is super fun to do. They have hands-on activities for the little people, hands-on activities for the big people too. So there's really something to do for everyone there. They have several different art galleries all throughout the Disney parks. I mainly know Walt Disney World, so that's what I'm going to talk about. They have an art gallery at Inventions that has some paintings, of Disney characters and some cells for their animation in there that you can purchase. So it's fun to go in there and watch and see that. They also have that same thing over at Disney Springs. So even if you don't go into the actual Disney parks, you can still do art. Of course, if you're at Epcot, you might as well go into Interventions where you can make your own digital art. At Art of Animation, they have art classes, so that's a resort. And the J- Japanese Pavilion has an art gallery in there if you happen to have a child who's interested in anime or manji. I'm probably saying that wrong. Anime, anyway, Japanese art. So that's a fun place to go. Many different Broadway shows. We count music as art in our homeschool, so Broadway shows are great to see at Disney. You have Lion King, you have Finding Nemo, you have Beauty and the Beast over at Hollywood Studios. So it's great to see some high quality shows while you're there. Architecture is everywhere at Disney. Disney takes great planes, pains to match their architecture in the park to the actual architecture in the world. So if you happen to be studying architectures, for instance, we studied Middle Eastern architecture, and went over to Morocco to see the Moroccan architecture. I can't take my kids to Morocco, but I can take my kids to Disney World to see pretty close architecture. And so if you go into like Italy, you'll see Italian style buildings. If you go over to Magic Kingdom, you're going to see If you're over in Liberty Square, you're going to see a colonial building in the Hall of Presidents, an antebellum building in the Haunted Mansion. So architecture is super easy to study at Disney. It takes a little bit of pre-planning though to do this one, because if you don't know anything about architecture, you don't know what you're looking at. So if you are already studying architecture, it's fun to do over there. If you aren't, then you might want to do some pre-studying before you go over, so that you can point some things out to the kids. Photography is everywhere at Disney. They have it sounds they sound like roving packs of wolves, but really they're roving packs of photographers. They have photographers everywhere, in every Disney park, around the world, I'm sure. That take pictures, of course, for your memory maker and things like that, which is your professional pictures. But they will often, if they are not busy, stop and talk to the kids and let the kids see their camera, and how they focus the shot and things like that. We've learned quite a bit from them. Disney also has what they call photo spots, which are prime places in the parks to take a photo, and they have signs that say, "Hey, take a photo here. You'd get a great photo." And so, if you've studied photography in the past, you could, if there's not a line, or you happen to have time. Sometimes we get a Mickey bar and then we go look, because everything is easier to learn when you're eating ice cream. But and we'll see, like, why is this a prime spot? It could be because it's in the gardens. It could be because it has an unobstructed view of the castle. It could be that the lighting is good. It's just, there are several different reasons why that would be a perfect photo spot, and those are quick and easy lessons that you can do. Of course, Disney is well known for their statues and their displays, so you, of course, could talk about how they make topiaries, how they make the statue, how they put the window display up on Main Street, USA. All of those are fun things to look at and see, and sort of peruse at your leisure. Parades and street entertainment are, of course, not to be missed. They're a great way if you're studying dance or the history of dance, or musical theater, anything like that. It's incomparable. If you're studying musical theater, you really should go to Disney. And of course, the costuming. Disney, like with their architecture, takes great pains to make sure that their costumes are on point. So they will make sure that their costume is perfect. And so if there were no buttons in 19, in the 1800s for the over in Liberty Square, then the guys walking around in the colonial uniforms will not have buttons on their colonial uniforms. So things like that. If you go over to by the Jungle Cruise and things like that, you will see a lot of Middle Eastern markets and things like that. So they will the costuming is not to be beat. So if you're studying any of that, it's great. You can walk through Disney and look at the costumes and just have a great time. So art, you don't even have to pre-plan, except for architecture. Any of the art things, you can teach art easily at any Disney park. So let's talk literature selections. Literature is like art, one of the easiest things you can do at any Disney park. Common knowledge is that most of the Disney stories are based on old fairy tales or other books. So it's super easy to do literature studies using the Disney parks. You just read whatever actual book goes with the item that you're looking at. So if you were going over into in Frontierland, you can meet Tiana from Princess and the Frog, and so you could read the Frog Prince by the Brothers Grimm. I'm gonna give you a caveat for the Brothers Grimm though. They aren't the fairy tales you think of when you read the Brothers Grimm. So if you have small children, early elementary, I highly recommend reading the Brothers Grimm, but you want to pre-read any of their selections beforehand, because they are the original fairy tales, but they are not the fairy tales that we are used to. They're not the Disney version of the fairy tales. So That's just my little caveat for the Brothers Grimm. But as you can see on this slide, there are many stories you can read. Mary Poppins is a good one and Mary Poppins Returns are good books that you can read with your upper elementary. Elementary kids would like Mary Poppins. But you could take it a step further and see the movie Saving Mr. Banks, and learn how Disney approached Walt Disney and the Disney Company now approached authors for their to use their stories and what some of their concerns might have been when Disney approached them. So that's a great movie to watch to talk about that, to see P.L. Travers' concerns about selling her stories to Disney and what would happen if she did. Swiss Family Robinson, of course, they have the Swiss Family Treehouse in Magic Kingdom. Winnie the Pooh, they have the ride. Everybody knows Winnie the Pooh. Aladdin actually is just a story in the book 1001 Nights, so it's not even a whole book. They made a whole movie and all that out of one story. So there are more literature selections on the next slide. So let's hop over and look at those. So here's some more literature selections you can use, and you can see them on there. It's nothing too exciting. Treasure Island, I actually threw in there because it's a really great book to read, and then go do Pirates of the Caribbean and all that. They sort of go hand in hand. So while Pirates doesn't necessarily have its own book, like it's not based off the story Pirates of the Caribbean. It is sort of loosely based off of Treasure Island, and Treasure Island does talk about pirates. I have a post on my blog all about what to study if you're doing pirates around Disney. So there you go. But it's also fun on this slide. You'll see Peter Pan. Sometimes the authors leave the rights to their works to charity, to other places. So the author of Peter Pan left the rights to his book to the Children's Hospital in London. And so when Disney negotiated for the story of Peter Pan, they had to part of the proceeds that go to that children's hospital. So that is fun to look up. There is no want for literature selections in any of the parks. If you're at Disneyland, you would see Sleeping Beauty's castle as opposed to Cinderella, so you could read Sleeping Beauty instead of Cinderella. If you are in Disneyland Paris, of course, you can read Beauty and the Beast instead of Cinderella or whatever. So just look around at whatever park you're going to. You'll easily discover literature selections to read beforehand, and then we of course like to discuss and do book reports and things like that on the difference between the real story, the actual story, and how Disney changed it and sort of Disneyfied it, and how close they are in comparison. So now let's move on from our art. We've talked about art. We've talked about literature, two super easy things to do. Nature, again, is one of those super easy things to do. They have the Flower and Garden Festival at Epcot every March through May. Is an excellent festival to go to if you're studying landscape design, botany, things like that. They have the Festival Center, which has lectures and hands-on demonstrations that your children can do. You can look at the topiaries and things like that. So if you are studying, if this is your year for botany, I highly suggest that. If you're just studying nature in general, it's always fun too to see what they do with the plants and how they put them around. And of course, at Disney, they have plants or flowers in the water. They have flowers hanging from the ceiling. They pretty much have flowers everywhere. So It's a fun place. You'll see butterflies, you'll see squirrels, you'll see ducks, you'll see, all that cool stuff. Living with the Land is also at Epcot, and it is all about agricultural studies, so it goes well with nature. They have a backstage tour called Behind the Seeds, which is fun to do. It's about $15 a person extra, which is cheap in Disney standards, but it's an excellent tour to take. They take you behind the seats or the scenes of the Living with the Land ride, and you get to see how they do their hydroponics and aquaponics and how they grow their stuff for their parks, and how they use different pests and different pollinators and things like that throughout the park to make their flowers bloom and all that good stuff. You also get, if you go during the Flower and Garden Festival, sometimes they'll let you walk through and see how they grow. You can go to the greenhouse and see how they grow. Um, for the flowers for the topiaries and how to put one together and all that. It's super fun to, even if you're not really interested in botany, it's still super fun to watch. So of course Animal Kingdom has lots of nature over there. You can do the gorilla trail and do a gorilla unit. You can see the monkeys in the middle of Asia and talk about monkeys. You can walk the trails and see the lions and the tigers and bears. Oh my! Um, and you, of course, have Rafiki's Planet Watch and Conservation Station, which all talk about the planet and all that, and how you can keep it, climate change and all that. So, nature, Animal Kingdom really hands down is the best place to go if you're studying nature. Any Disney park is going to be easy to teach nature because it's all right there. Walt Disney World's a little bit easier because it's sort of set back off the road and things like that. So some of nature sort of comes in just because of its location. So, but any of the Disney parks, you're going to be able to sort of see lots of nature. Like I said, they have plants hanging from the ceiling, from the doorpost. I mean, everywhere. So it's not hard. One of the things we like to learn is about the park rodent management plan. Now, Disney does so much food and trash and all that in one day that they clearly have to have some sort of plan in place for how to keep the rodent population down. In Walt Disney World, that plan just happens to be snakes. So they let snakes loose throughout the park, and it's really not hard because again they're in a remote location, so there are snakes there anyway. But they have snakes loose throughout the park, and so if you're in a quieter area or one of the less traveled areas like Epcot, Animal Kingdom, we've seen them at both. I've not seen one at Magic Kingdom, but that does not mean that they're not there. That just means that that park is super busy. Um, and you're not gonna. I mean, we're not talking poisonous snakes. You're not gonna see an anaconda going through the grass eating rodents while you walk. You're actually not going to see any rats or anything while you walk. They make sure of that. But you can see garter snakes and black racers and things like that slithering through the grass and through the trees throughout the parks. And know that Disney, like they take care of them like they do the ducks and all that. I often laugh and tell my children that in my next life I want to come back as a Disney duck because they really live the life. Um, but they do take care of them, and they take great pains, of course, to keep you away from them. So if you see a snake, of course, don't touch it, and you don't even need to tell a cast member because all a cast member is going to do is make sure it's not near any of the guests and shoo it's on its way because it has a job to do. It really does a great job in Walt Disney World of keeping the rodent population down. Disneyland has packs of feral cats that they let roam through the park, and so the cats keep the rodent population down, and they get fed. So it's sort of a win-win. a great symbiotic relationship between the cats and Disneyland. I don't know what they do in the other parks. I just know what they do in those two parks. But I'm positive that there is a park rodent management plan in every Disney park around the globe. Bay Lake, of course, is at Walt Disney World. It is the giant lake in front of Magic Kingdom where Grand Floridian and the Contemporary and the Polynesian all sit on it. And you can go into those resorts and park if it's not super crowded and sort of walk over to the beach and look at the lake, and you'll see the marshes. You can ride the ferry too and see it. You can rent jet skis and canoes and all that if you want to do that. But if you just want to go over, sort of walk along the lake and see, um, study the life cycle in the lake. Now, here's my caveat for that. It is a lake in the middle of Florida. It's a man made lake, but it's still a puddle of water in Florida. If there's water in Florida, you should always assume there are alligators in it. So, coming from a native Floridian, I will tell you that you should always assume when you see water that there's an alligator in it or near it or coming to it, or whatever. So, don't, let your small children play at the edge of the lake in a marshy area because alligators can't tell the difference between small children and small animals. So, I mean, use some common sense here and stay up there with your kids. But you can see like turtles and alligators and fish and other things, ducks and birds. It's really a great place to a great lake to sort of ride through. You can take the ferry boat too from Magic Kingdom over to Fort Wilderness, and that will sort of take you through a canal and through a whole bunch of trees so that you can sort of see backwoods Disney. So, moving on from nature, let's talk about American history at Walt Disney World. Now, Disney has what they call the Yes series of classes. It is youth in education, and one of those ones you can take is a class about American history. It is, of course, you have to have like a group of 10. So, if you have like some friends going, or if you live nearby and you can get some of your buddies to go with you, that'd be great. It is an additional cost plus your ticket. So I like to make sure everybody knows that before they. It's a great class though. They teach them all about for American history in Magic Kingdom. They teach them all about Liberty Square, and they do some fun hands-on activities, learning about silver and what they would have, paid for in colonial times, what it would have looked like. They let them go through Hall of Presidents, which is great for learning American history. But the fun part of going through Hall of Presidents when it's closed is that they'll let you see the animatronics. So they sort of use American history to show you how they make the animatronic presidents, and that's super interesting. Hall of Presidents, of course, is right there in Liberty Square in Frontierland, and you can learn. Um, it has all of the presidents from George Washington to the current one. They will also tell you the story of why there is a brown, the middle of the sidewalk or the walkway in going into from Liberty Square into Frontierland is brown, and there's a reason why it is that color. I'm not going to spoil the surprise and tell you, but as I've said earlier, Disney goes to great lengths to be sure that they are historically accurate, and that is one of the reasons why that's there. So, Hall of Presidents is great. Like I said, we after like the third time though, let's be honest, Hall of Presidents is pretty boring. So we go to the Hall of Presidents a couple times. We pick a couple presidents to talk about, and then we only go in if there's a new president because it's always fun to see that. And if it's super hot, the Hall of Presidents is great because it's air conditioned. Haunted Mansion is right there. That's great for talking about plantations, antebellum South. Splash Mountain, the same. Antebellum South talks about slavery and things like that. Now, the the caveat, of course, with Splash Mountain is that your children need to be mature enough to have those conversations with. So you could talk. I would think that if you were going to study the story behind Splash Mountain, it would be upper elementary, middle school, high school, because it is about slavery and all that. So little kids are going to love riding Splash Mountain because one, you get wet. Two, I mean, it's fun. Disney makes everything fun, but if you're learning the story actually behind it, I don't know if I would do that with K through third grade, in my opinion. So, Frontierland, of course, has Pirates of the Caribbean. Walking up Main Street, USA, is also great because you can sort of see what life looks like in a small. It's designed to be a small American town, so it would be like the downtown of a small American town. So that's fun to look at, to see the offices and on the windows and all that. Carousel of Progress is over in Tomorrowland, and I put this in because one, you get to sit down, which if you've been at Disney for any length of time, any ride where you get to sit down is a good ride. Two, you get to it's air conditioned. Again, you're in Florida, so but it is a really fun way to look at um, how America has progressed from early pioneer all the way through what a future American family would look like. I highly suggest studying the story behind Carousel of Progress. There's a reason why they made it, and so that's always fun. Then you could talk about world fairs and things like that, which isn't something always in your history text. So it's fun to sort of see that. When you learn about World's Fair, then they have the visual. If you have highly visual kids like I do, they have the visual of the Carousel of Progress, so it sort of makes sense to them what the World's Fair would look like. You have Epcot has the American Pavilion, and of course, there's lots of stuff to do over there. Hollywood Studios has the Muppet Story. They talk about American history in that. Not a lot, but enough. And of course, the Skyline. If you walk down um, the I can't even think of it. I think it's the Street of States. But if you walk down the one of the back streets going toward Toy Story Land, you can sort of see the skyline of an American city. I believe it's New York City. Um, don't quote me on that one, but I know it's a city. So there's some you really got to work for it over at Hollywood Studios, unlike Magic Kingdom and Epcot. But it's there, and you can still see it. If you wanted to learn about other histories, which we're going to talk about this in cultural studies in a couple slides, of course you could do that at Animal Kingdom, but you're not going to talk a whole lot about American history over at Animal Kingdom. If you don't want to pre-plan, of course I would suggest Magic Kingdom because they have Liberty Square and Frontierland. You could do it easily. If you do have some time to pre-plan, you can make a whole unit study out of it and use all three of the parks. So let's talk about science or STEM. Lots of people get excited about STEM these days. It's one of the educational buzzwords, if you will. So lots of people ask about, can you do science or STEM over at any of the Disney parks? And I'm telling you, any educational activity at a Disney park is super easy to do. You can, of course, study the history of humankind at Spaceship Earth. It takes you from cave people and the Phoenicians giving you the alphabet all the way through what they believe, all the way through computers and what they believe the future will look like. Innovations has lots of science and STEM in there. You can see it's at Epcot as well. You can sort of see the laser lights and things like that. Mission to Mars at Epcot, it's all about space. The Seas with Nemo's and Friends is a really great place to do marine biology. You sort of ride the ride and you see Nemo and all that, and then you get to go into the huge aquarium. And they also have, if you like to dive, or you can dive, then they have a diver's quest in there where you can dive in the actual aquarium. with all the fish. So, Journey into Imagination with Figment is all about science and technology. Um, One of the Yes series classes over at Magic Kingdom is the science behind roller coasters or the science behind animatronics. They will bring you to the science behind soaring at Epcot. You, of course, have transportation you can study. Disney has the ferry boats, the monorails, the buses, the people movers, the trams, they have all kinds of transportation ideas. Every park has fireworks, so of course, if you study the science behind fireworks, there you go. Every park has animatronics. Tomorrowland is right there. They have like some spaceships, and they have Buzz Lightyear's Stark Man. So it's space related. Of course, most of the time, you have Space Mountain. So for Tomorrowland, if I was going to use Tomorrowland to study science, I would study space. You could do paleontology at Dino Land. They have the boneyard where you can dig up fake bones. They, of course, have when you walk through the dinosaur ride, you can see sort of the scientist offices. So you can see all of that and all kinds of dinosaurs there at Dino Land in Animal Kingdom. The Tree of Life is in the middle. It's where you go where it's tough to be a bug, which you should certainly go see if you're doing nature. It's Tough to Be a Bug talks about how all the bugs help us out and what they do for our environment that keeps us comfortable. But they have different animals and bugs and things like that carved into the tree. So it's fun to go look at and to sort of see what's there. Now you're thinking to yourself, how does that make it science STEM? Research what the Tree of Life is actually made out of, which, by the way, is an oil rig, an old oil rig. And so, just the science behind getting that rig, getting it there, turning it into a tree, and all of that is pretty impressive. And it's a great unit for high schoolers to do to see how recycle, reuse. Of course, um, that's the main goal of Animal Kingdom. And I put Magical Mouse Schoolhouse down here, and you're wondering, what is that? So, I Jody Weisenhunt wrote Magical Mouse Schoolhouse. It's a book. You can buy it on Amazon. You can buy it off her website, Magical Mouse Schoolhouse. She has a Facebook page, all that. And I met her at one of the Yes series promotions they were doing. They brought some bloggers in, and we did several of the Yes series classes together and learned all about it. But the Magical Mouse Schoolhouse is a whole book about homeschooling at Disney. But when I first picked it up, I was like, oh, this isn't about like using the Disney, like I'm telling you to read Swiss Family Robinson to do that or Treasure Island for pirates. She actually gives you experiments you can do at home to to do some of the things that they do at Disney, like how they make the ghost appear in Haunted Mansion. She actually walks you through how they do that and how you can do it at home. So she has several different, it's a whole book of experiments. It's actually pretty cool. So if that's what you're into, then I highly suggest checking that book out and checking out her blog and website. So geography is one of those things that you can do at Disney, but they sort of take a little bit of pre-planning. I started off the presentation showing you all of the things you can do at Disney that are pretty easy to do. Like you don't need a whole lot of pre-planning. If you do, I tell you that you do, like the architecture and art. But most of the things I've talked about already are super simple to do. You don't need a whole lot of time to set it up, and you can learn about it even if you get there and you're like, oh, let's learn about this. It's really easy. Geography is a little different. You have to sort of take some time to set it up and to make it make it happen. It's not one of those things you're going to stumble into. You have to purposely go looking for geography at to learn geography at the Disney parks. So a couple of ways that we do it: park maps. Park maps are everywhere. Every time you walk into a park, you get a map. Every time you walk into a resort, you get a map. Everywhere you go, there's a map. But what I do is I like to give my kids the maps, and we sort of mark them north, south, east, west, so they make that on there, and then their compass on there, and then they can map out how we get here, how we get there, and things like that. I'll ask them, hey, we're at Liberty Square. How do we get to Living with the Land at Epcot? And they gotta tell me that, how to get from one park to the next and things like that. So you can park maps and how to get from one place to the next is a great way to learn geography. They have the Wilderness Explorer series at Animal Kingdom. You get little stamps in your booklet as you walk around, and then at the end you take this oath and you get a certificate and all that. That is super fun. It is. I count it as geography, not nature, because you have to walk around Animal Kingdom and look for the continents that you need. Like, you need a stamp in Africa, and they tell you where to go in Africa. So I would pair it up with a park map so that they get some map reading skills in there as well. So that's what we do. Where in the world are all the Disney parks? So you can easily study geography by just finding all of the Disney parks. And World Showcase at Epcot has all the different countries, not all the countries in the world, but several. And so you, of course, can look at your map or look on the map and find all of the countries that you're looking at in World Showcase. Cultural studies can sort of go hand in hand with the geography studies that we talked about in the previous slide. Of course, It's a Small World is the perfect ride to go on for cultural studies because that's the whole ride. It shows you different cultures. The Three Caballeros in the Mexico Pavilion at Epcot is a similar ride to It's a Small World. It's a boat ride, and you sort of walk through and you follow the Three Caballeros through Latin America. So that's a great. They have a ziggurat and all that in there. That's a wonderful cultural study. Unlike when you go over to Norway and you ride the Frozen ride, I'm not quite sure how much Norway culture you're taking in riding the Frozen ride, but there is some there. Any of the countries at World Showcase are gonna be able to easily be done with cultural studies. They have sort of entertainment and shows that go on at every country that pertain to that country. They have the architecture there, of course, for that country, and they have people walking around and working in those countries that are actually from those countries. So you can learn a lot about the different countries just by walking through World Showcase and looking and talking and watching the shows. So there's that. The Food and Wine Festival I threw in here because it's excellent. They have not only the countries that you normally get at Epcot, but they have several other countries like Korea and Australia and things like that, Argentina, that you don't normally get. And they have small samples of food that you can order from those countries. So you can do your cultural studies and you can eat at the same time. Now, my favorite part about that is like the I say samples because you're not like gonna get a whole meal at the. I mean, by the time you walk around World Showcase at Food and Wine Festival, you have a meal. But it's not one booth isn't going to be a whole meal. But they're small enough and they're like $5 or $6. So if your child doesn't like it and you have to throw it away, it's no big deal. But it is a great way to teach to sort of teach children, or to what's the word I'm looking for? um, Make them aware of other food in other countries and how it might taste like. I discovered that my children like the taste of lamb because we tried it in the Australia pavilion. But I also discovered that my children aren't real fond of other things. It's also super great for food allergy families, which mine is one of, because you can get gluten-free, dairy-free options not at every booth, but at several of the booths. So you can still try them out and expose, there's the word I was looking for, expose your children to different tastes and different ideas. They also have the World of Coke at Epcot, where you can try all of the different ways that Coca-Cola is made in different countries. I don't try the Italy one. It's so gross. So gross. But there are others, and some of them are sweet, like super sweet. Some of them are fruity. Some of them are super gross, like Italy, because they're really bitter. But that is certainly a great way so that you could teach your children that not all cultures eat and act the same. So cultural studies are easy to do at Disney. I could talk for hours and hours and hours about different ways you can homeschool or learn while at Disney parks. So I'm gonna wrap it up here for you so that you're not watching me for hours. Finance is another way you can learn about Disney parks. How much money does a Disney park take in a day? How much does it cost to run a Disney park or to build a Disney park or to add on to a Disney park? How much do they pay their employees versus their CEO, which has been in the news lately? What are some of the benefits of being an employee at a Disney park? So you can certainly learn all kinds of financial information and teach that to your child using the Disney parks. The keys to the Kingdom tours in Magic Kingdom, it'll be good for your high school kids because I'm pretty sure you have to be 16 or older to take it. But they take you behind the scenes of Magic Kingdom, and why you have to be older is because you go into the tunnel system below the park. So Magic Kingdom is actually sitting on the second floor of 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 that particular park. There's a whole system of tunnels underneath it, which is how the whole place runs so efficiently without showing it to the guest. And so you get to go down there, and you of course can see costuming, and you can see the different characters coming through. You can see the break room. You see all the back behind the scenes of Magic Kingdom. You could study who is Walt Disney, like what gave him the idea to come up with Mickey Mouse? How many ideas did he start with? Who sort of took the reins of the Disney company after his death? Because you didn't have Disneyland Paris and all the other overseas ones when he died. So that's always good to learn about the person that originally had the idea and how it's come from Disneyland all the way over to what it is now. Marine biology is easy to do at over at Nemo and Friends. We've talked about that. Movie set design is fantastic at Hollywood Studios. That's where Hollywood Studios really shines. Is the whole movie set design. You can go behind the scenes. Of course, they have Star Wars lands coming out, and they have Toy Story Mania, and you can see some movie sets all through there. Um, you could also study the impact of the Disney parks on their local communities. Like, what kind of impact did Walt Disney World have on the city of Orlando or the surrounding communities? What sort of impact has Disneyland had on Anaheim, California? And it's probably more prevalent in California because it's so much more densely populated than it is in Orlando. But there are certainly impacts that any of the Disney parks, Disneyland Paris, Tokyo, Hong Kong, all of those have had on their local communities, good and bad. So that's always fun to or interesting. It's fun too, but interesting to look at as well. So, yeah, that's all I have. There are other places to find me. I hope you learned a whole lot today, and that it gave you some ideas if you're going to the Disney parks, or if you live nearby, how to incorporate them into your homeschooling. It's super fun to do, and my kids have learned so much more, um, so much by going there and seeing it firsthand. I have highly visual kids, in case you're wondering. But I blog over at Our Crazy Adventures in AutismLand.com. I talk about, obviously, autism. I talk about Disney, and I talk extensively about how to make Disney work for kids with autism. Lots of people don't go to Disney parks because they think that they can't, because their child won't be able to handle it. But with certain things in place, you can have a great time. And even with autism, you can homeschool using Disney parks. I talk about not only homeschooling using Disney parks, but how to do therapy at Disney parks. Um, I'm sort of a Disney fan, can you tell? Twitter, Insta, you can see all that. You're either going to find me at Our Crazy Adventures in Autism Land, or you're going to find me on those channels under Autism Land Penny. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to brainstorm ideas with you. If you're going somewhere, if you're going on a Disney cruise, I have ideas for that. Um, you have in your swag bag a coupon for a free item of your choice from my store. I certainly think that there are items already over there that you will love, but it does not expire until the end of the year. So if you sort of want to hold on to that coupon or write down the code, right after not Toy Story Land, Star Wars Land opens in Walt Disney World in August, I will have my homeschooling using Disney Parks ebook available for purchase, and it will have everything we've talked about in here and then some, plus actual ideas and worksheets and things like that. So if this is super interesting to you, then I suggest you hold on to it, and then you can get it for free. If not, go over, get something for free no matter what, and then just come back and you can get the ebook if you like. So thanks for coming.